What if the real competitive edge in the age of AI isn't data, but emotional intelligence?
You might get some excellent therapeutic resource from an AI. You're never going to be able to get that humanistic element. You're never going to be able to get that real deep human connection that actually we really need to heal.
My guest today is Hannah Lord, a therapist and a coach who believes that mental work is just as essential as physical exercise.
You wouldn't assume that you go to the gym once and then you never ever need to exercise ever again. And yet we seem to think we treat therapy like it's going to the doctor, that we really don't want to have to do unless something's really, really wrong. Whereas it should be that a therapist gives you the tools to have that daily practice, to be able to understand and self-regulate and constantly do that work.
In this chat, we explore the dynamics of masculine and feminine energy in the context of relationships, why the thing we're angry about is rarely actually the thing we're angry about, and then finally, what it means to really know ourselves.
Something I always say is the thing is never the thing. The thing we're annoyed about is never actually the thing. It's always something else. Feminine takes everything, and then you move into your masculine to streamline that into a single focus so that you can then make a decision on what to do. We have to take responsibility for ourselves, making space for two different experiences to be equally valid. We love black and white thinking, and the world just doesn't work like that, right? We're all right and we're all wrong, quite often. Our emotions are there in such a clever design, and yet we seem to think for some reason that our emotions are broken. Let them come through. They are there for a reason, and they contain information that's going to take us to the next place.
Let's dive into it. This is The Nick Standlea Show.
The Nick Standlea Show.
Before we dive in, just one quick thing. This is a community. You are a part of our journey. And the way we keep it alive is by convincing a faceless, humorless algorithm that we care. So do us all a favor. Tickle the algorithm by pushing that subscribe button. And in return, we'll keep bringing you brilliant minds like today's guest. Hannah, welcome to the show.
Hi, Nick. It's very good to be here.
Yes, absolutely. So, Hannah, let's start at the beginning. How did you get into therapy? Becoming a therapist?
How did I become a therapist? Well, I had always had an interest in psychology, and I actually worked in corporate marketing for quite a long time, and I trained as a coach. But the real truth of it is that I actually went to therapy myself to deal with quite a difficult relationship I was in, and having not really experienced therapy myself, I suddenly realized I had a ton of problems that it wasn't the relationship. It was like there was loads of stuff outside of that I hadn't been aware of. And for me, that was so exciting because that is something that, of course, I can have some sort of influence over, some control over, right? Of like looking at myself and what I hadn't yet understood. And
right.
There were so many things that I had. So the real gift of therapy, I think, is there were so many things that I believed. I mean, I'm talking, I was in my sort of late 20s. I thought were fixed. I thought they were just part of me. I thought they were just, non-negotiables, and yet could be completely transformed. And that's the way I related to people, the things I believed about myself, the way that I processed my own emotions. There was so much that could actually be hugely shifted for such positive benefit just by even just a couple of sessions of therapy. So, of course, I get really excited thinking, why doesn't everybody know this? And how do I share this with as many people as possible? And ended up going into the training myself further down the line.
What, if you're open to sharing it, what were some of those eye-opening moments in those early sessions where it changed your whole viewpoint about yourself?
It's a really good question. We're going back a long time now, and there's I don't know if you're in therapy yourself, but there's always more work to do, right? There's always you take the first layer off and there's more to excavate underneath. I know that one of the biggest learnings early on was how I related to my own parents and what I'd sort of projected onto them, and how that had shaped my worldview of what what I expected from men, what I expected from women, what I expected from myself. So many of these little, and it sounds basic Freudian stuff, right? But it really had such an impact on me. And I found it very powerful to sort of release that, because the beautiful thing about when you make what is just lurking in your unconscious, as soon as you bring it to your conscious mind, you sort of have control, more power over it, not power over it, but you have more relationship with it. So you can choose what to do with it. And sometimes it's as easy as just letting it go and realizing like, oh, okay, no, that's old stuff. I don't need that anymore.
So by bringing awareness to some of our automatic reactions, they can be less automatic, and we can choose if we want to indulge them or let them go or temper them. Is that?
Yeah, totally.
If you weren't a therapist, what do you think? Where do you think your life would have gone if you hadn't had those moments in those first therapy sessions?
Do you know, I actually think about this all the time, because at different stages of my life, I wanted it to be a different thing. When I was really little, I actually wanted to be an actress because I was very extroverted at a very young age, and such a little performer, and always wanted to, I'm very creative. And so I always was coming up with different little screenplays and, things that I wanted to perform for people. And strangely, but beyond the age of 8 or 9, I wasn't that person at all anymore. I wasn't extroverted at all. And because of just through experiences at school, and I'd already chiseled away so much of myself, and I actually became so shy. And so it's really interesting how much we can change, given our environment or what we're learning at different times. I actually studied fashion design originally. So I went into design, again, that creative side, but my mum was a seamstress. And so I was taught how to use a sewing machine at a very young age, used to make my own clothes, that sort of stuff. So loved that. And then kind of pursued that, ran my own business for a while, but then reached a ceiling with that, and was teaching on the side in fashion. And just the way that I was communicating with students, and that kind of teaching, that one-to-one element and one-to-many element, I just really, really loved. So kind of followed the coaching and the psychology side of it in the end.
It's interesting how in school, so many kids have that extroverted, but it's extroversion / a creative side beaten out of them through the environment, when it's not one that is supportive of that type of, because it's a little divergent from normal behavior to have that really active imagination. And
school breaks my heart. School really breaks my heart, and especially the more that we're talking about neurodiversity these days. I mean, school is a bit of a jungle anyway, because you've got all these kids sort of, unleashing themselves on each other, and there can be a lot of bullying, and kids are learning who they are in the world and playing out certain dynamics. That's challenging enough. But I think where we really let kids down, and I believe it's changing now, or I hope so. Certainly when I was at school, our academic structural system caters for one type of learner, and there are at least 7. If you look at the different ways that different people, relate to learning material, and just the way their brains work, and we're limiting that to such a narrow field of just for sort of rote learning, logical academic learners. It's such a shame, and it does such damage to kids' confidence.
Well, I agree. And one of the things I really wanted to unpack with you today is the importance of mental skills and mental training and doing the work on ourselves as we enter into this age of AI, because so much of those repetitive skills and just having job skills will be taken over by these large learning models and these machines. And I think to be able to contribute authentically to the world, those creative skills, that emotional intelligence, all of that is going to become extra important. And
100%.
Kind of skipping ahead here, but I did want to ask you, how would you alter education, especially at a young age, if you could, to help teach some of that emotional intelligence and some of this these mental skills that will help kids thrive in the future?
I believe that the way I would approach this is pretty similar to the way I'd approach anything, which is about giving back to the individual for introspection rather than following a model and following a set of rules. Like, we're so good at externalizing things, at looking outside of ourselves for something to follow, for a certain way of doing things. I think the more information we have, the better, but so that we can make our own choices about what we choose to do with that suits us personally. And when it comes to children learning and developing, you want to really celebrate that kid for its individuality, not for the way in which you benchmark it against other children. It's about, what if we look at just ourselves learning, how does my brain work? What stimulates me? What gets me interested? What makes me excited? How do I find interest and joy in the world? How do I interpret things? How do I connect the dots? And then how do I take that on to the choices that I make and the actions and, aligned with my intentions and all of this stuff? I use this in my corporate training in the workplace. I use it when I have worked with children as well. I don't do child's therapy, but I have done art therapy in schools and gone in and done different volunteering programs at different points. And it's so impactful when you give that individuality back to the child and celebrate them for their difference, basically. We're all so afraid of difference, and that's where we are unique. That's the magic of us, really.
Right, and that's what enables us to make a unique contribution to the world. You said something there about connecting the dots. Seth Godin, who I'm a big fan of, and he's been on the show, and he has this phrase about education that I really like, where he said, school is designed to help you collect dots instead of connect them. And because let's spend some time on algebra, even though you're just trudging through it, you have no interest in it, you're not going to go help build spaceships one day where you're going to need this mathematical framework. But this kid comes alive when he or she is writing a story. And I really think education needs to make this shift to be more individualized, like you're talking about, where we're going to help that kid connect the dots on what makes them tick, be a guide to help them find their path. And I'm hopeful that AI will make that easier to do, to a more individualized education. But I kind of think we're going to have no alternative to it at some point, and the sooner education shifts, the better.
Yeah, I agree. I really agree. I think it's super interesting because the world has a way of sort of forcing our hand when we're not listening to something, right? And I think I think that's what AI is doing. And I think in the same way as what you were just talking about, when I was at school, you very much had to decide at such a young age what career you wanted to go into, and then do the subjects that would lead you to that career. And now the world has changed so that a lot of the jobs, the world's moving so rapidly that a lot of the jobs don't even exist yet, for what those children would be doing by the time that they're mature enough to go into those roles. So our hand has been forced to think, okay, well, let's look at key skills. What are you interested in? And that's the way we should have been doing it all along, quite possibly. Yeah. But we've been molded that way. In the same way with AI, I actually have a very optimistic view. I know everybody's quite concerned at the moment about where that's going and the unknown. But when it comes to therapy, I know that a lot of therapists are dubious about, well, it's really quite threatening to have AIs taking over that therapist role. And, how do we know what they'll, inform clients or whatever? I actually don't think it's that big a problem, because in the way that I see it is, you're never going to be able to get that humanistic element. You're never going to be able to get that real deep human connection that actually we really need to heal. However, you might get some excellent therapeutic resource from an AI, and potentially AIs would do less damage than, say, you had a human therapist that wasn't attuned to you in the right way. Because therapy is all about the relationship that the therapist builds with the client. Now, Nick, if I'm talking to you and I am your therapist and you feel totally misunderstood by me, on an unconscious level, that's potentially much more rejecting an experience for you than if I was an AI and you just go, oh, well, it's only AI, you know? Like
Right.
I don't think it affects us on that deep human level. So at the same extent where connection can go way deeper and much further when it's human to human, I think so does rejection. And so for that kind of middle space, there might be a really positive benefit to get people out of just when they feel really lost and helpless. So I don't think it's a blanket, AI will be bad in the therapy space, but I think there's a lot that it won't be able to deliver that will still rely on the humanistic element.
Absolutely. I mean, there is something magical about being in person with someone. I mean, I don't know what the word is why I'm using magical, but there is so much nonverbal communication when you're in a room with someone. I mean, this is great to be able to talk to you like this, and we're on opposite sides of the world right now, and we wouldn't be able to have this conversation if it weren't for this technology. And yet, I know this conversation would be a little different if we were in the same room. There's just
next time,
more.
Nick, next time.
That's right. Next time you come out to California, where in are you in London? Where in
I'm
England
in London.
are you?
Yeah, I'm in London. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, next
But
time I'm
even-
out in
so
London
interestingly-
for a football match.
Yes. Why would anyone else come here? But even because I work with a lot of clients internationally, and surprisingly, again, our hand was forced in COVID to take therapy online. And it's quite remarkable, actually. It is about that attunement. So when I'm working with a client and we're in session, I will be so attuned to them that sometimes they can be chatting about their day, giving me some kind of, introductory rundown or whatever. And my heart is racing and I feel really, and I know that that's not mine. And so I'll just ask an inquiring question of like, what's going on? And suddenly they're carrying this ton of stress. And I've been able to pick that up in a way that I'm not sure how AI would ever be able to do that, because it really it's a human attunement of whatever's happening. And I don't know how it's able to happen online, but it happens all the time, in that same way. So that's the sort of secret sauce that I believe will be missing.
Completely agree, because humans, if nothing else, we've evolved to tune in to what's going on with other humans. Right? I mean, that was a survival thing for so many tens of thousands of years, to just what's this other human going to do next? And so, we're trained to do that. And on the topic of AI therapists, I mean, I think if you step back and go, well, what about all these people who don't have the resources to hire a personal
100%.
therapist?
Yeah.
That at least this would be something that's available to them, and available 24/7. I mean, if you're having suicidal thoughts in the middle of the night, that AI therapist would always be there, and it'd be pretty easy to train it, to give it some resources to tell someone, don't make a permanent decision right now.
Yeah. And what is also really important to factor in is that whilst I say that the efficacy of the therapy is based on the relationship between the therapist and the client, it's also really dependent on whether the client is ready. Now, there will be lots of people who are maybe not ready to go to the depths of dealing with something yet. And AI can be that beautiful space where they test out, how they feel about this, and they maybe get some resources, some answers, some small comfort before they're ready to actually work with a therapist and go much deeper, because it's intimidating, right? It can be quite frightening. It takes a lot of courage to go to therapy, and you can only do it when you're ready.
Right. I assume so. I haven't done it. I'm a huge proponent of it. I believe in it. I spend a lot of time doing self-work with meditation and speaking to friends, where we dig in pretty deep to what's going on and what issues might be surfacing from childhood or things from the past. But I also have friends. I mean, I have several couples I know that go to couples therapy, and not because something's wrong. They just found it improved their relationship. And I love that idea, that framework, that it doesn't necessarily mean something's broken. It just means we're going to put energy into this, like taking a multivitamin every day or going to the gym. Yeah. Yeah.
It really, actually, that's the thing.
Since that came up, yeah, let's dive into that, because I know that's a metaphor you like for mental work.
It is, because I mean, now everyone's obsessed with the gym, right? We love to brag about how often we're going, how much we're training. And yet you wouldn't assume that you go to the gym once and then you never, ever need to exercise ever again. And yet we seem to think we treat therapy like it's going to the doctor, that we really don't want to have to do unless something's really, really wrong. And then, just as briefly as possible. Whereas it should be that a therapist gives you the tools to have that daily practice, to be able to understand and self-regulate and constantly do that work. It doesn't mean you're suddenly fixed and you're going to be amazing at relationships. I mean, even therapy, me, myself, I still have to work on myself all the time. I still have to work on relationships, communication, all of those things. We all have an ego, and that ego loves to intervene wherever possible. And so it's something that you always have to, just be aware of and catch and understand, like, oh yeah, that's that stuff coming up again. But again, when you're aware of it, it's so much easier to know what to do with it, rather than when it's all in the unconscious. Our unconscious just runs riot.
What's an example of that you see with couples that come in where something's running riot from our unconscious? Let's say my wife and I come in, and you can make up an example for me. That just something an example of that. Yeah.
Well, there are so many examples of where that, what we're saying is not what the other person hears. But the example actually that came to mind is a couple's, is an example of two co-founders that I was working with, actually. And the relationship, they were building a business together, and yet the business was a bit stagnant because they were just not getting on whatsoever. And one of them was quite, let's say, he was taking the driving seat, and the other one was really not really pulling his weight whatsoever. And I actually worked one-to-one with the original founder, and he was the one who was the driver, yeah. And I was like, look, what is going on here? Like, tell me what. And as we were working through his relationship with his partner, he suddenly realized that his partner was so similar to his father's personality, to his dad, and that there was this unconscious bond to his dad, and he really wanted to have that, fun, playful. He still wanted to, like, it was so caught up in childhood dynamics. And as soon as he realized that, because this guy was super smart, as soon as he realized that, he was like, oh my God, okay, that's embarrassing, and was able to lift that projection back off of his co-founder. And suddenly they were business partners again. And he was in the workspace again, rather than this sort of codependent emotional space that he'd been in, which far predated and wasn't about this guy whatsoever. It was all about him and his father.
Right.
So that stuff is very powerful.
And they had a romantic relationship, or just the business relationship?
No. This was just the business relationship. No, this is purely co-founder stuff.
Well, okay. So let's move into that stuff. As if you're working with a business founder, a CEO. I mean, I'm running two companies right now. One in the educational space, which I've run for 20 years, and then now this podcast has become a company as well. What sort of work would you recommend for me to be more effective and achieve my goals in the workspace?
Everything is about the individuals and the collective. I always, in my work, I talk a lot about the language can be quite polarizing, but I see everything as a bit of an ecosystem, right? That absolutely everything is affecting everything else. So you need to look at you, the full context of you and what's going on for you and all of the different operations within that, but also all the different individuals that you're interacting with. You know, what's their neurodiversity? What's their relationship with you? What's their relationship outside of work? Because we bring so much of ourselves into everything that we do. And it's about understanding, because something I always say is the thing is never the thing. You know, the thing we're annoyed about is never actually the thing. It's always something else. And it's about understanding what is that? What are the roots of that? You know, when we have an extreme response to something, it always indicates that that's not really something in the present. There's something going on outside of that. So it's just knowing how all of those dynamics interplay, and crucially, that this stuff is always in movement. We love to lock things down and figure things out and have something fixed. And yet we're human beings. We don't operate like that. We're so changeable. You know, we bring different parts to ourselves to work all the time. You know, we have different moods, different cycles, different ways of being. And we need to just kind of make space for all of that and allow that movement so that we can all see what's happening in that ecosystem at any one time.
Right. Well, and those dynamics are shifting, because if there's an employee, one of our teachers, for the sake of argument, let's say sees the CEO as like a father figure, and they address that and work through a little bit of that stuff to have a more effective relationship. Well, now that dynamic has shifted to there's a new one. And then that one needs to be navigated and dealt with to continue to make it more effective. I mean, what I'm getting from you, what I'm hearing from you is that there's no end point. There's just small incremental improvements. And attunement to what's going on. You know, just what is happening right now, and just being very aware of that. And are you aware of the transactional analysis model? I am not. So that can be really helpful, but that is another example of this, and also links into the question you had about you and your wife earlier. This comes up a lot, is just that flow of communication. We're always in, response, receptive and active mode, right? The feminine and the masculine, and we're oscillating between the two all the time, not, beyond gender, like even within ourselves, but then when there are two people doing that dance. And transactional analysis is really helpful because it looks at the parent, adult, child framework. Now, if I speak to you in a very authoritative, confident way, if that's something that you're used to, that might not be an issue at all. But for whatever reason, whatever relationships you've had previously, that potentially might trigger you to feel a little spoken down to or infantilized, and you go into a child position and see me as, dominant. And that is like quite a punishing parent stance. And whereas we want to be in our adult, right? Because our adult is who we are now in the present. And say I trigger that and you go into your child position, you might then get angry and feel like you need to come back at me with a more dominant stance. And then I get triggered into my child position, perhaps. Or we go into, it's parent to parent talking to each other, or child to child. And really neither of us are in our adult. We're just in quite a trigger state, and our egos are at play. And so it's really interesting. That's another example of the fluidity of, it's a dance of, I'm responding to you, and what's that bringing up for me, and then what am I then projecting out, and you're then responding to. So it's just being aware of all of those dynamics and how it might affect the team as a whole and the business as a whole. This episode is brought to you by Manta Sleep. As you have astutely observed, I've got one of their sleep masks on my face right now. I'm staring up at thousands of watts of studio lights, and yet all I see is pure black. It's as though I've been dropped into the middle of a cave in Kentucky. This sleep mask helps me sleep like a baby, waking up refreshed, ready to take on the day. Here's why it helps me sleep. The secret isn't just the blackout fabric. It's the eye cups. They don't touch your eyes at all, which means no eyelashes brushing, no lids getting pressed shut, no weird sensation of suffocating inside a hot sock like you get with other sleep masks. Just perfect, adjustable space that keeps you in total darkness. Honestly, it feels a little decadent for my eyes, like they finally made it to the VIP lounge. Most sleep masks, they're made of cheap materials that pinch your face in weird places and make you question your life choices. But Manta Sleep Mask took all of that into account. They use soft, breathable fabric. It's got an adjustable strap that fits even the strangest shaped heads, like mine. I use my Manta Sleep Mask at home. I use it on planes. And as a proud supporter of the pro-nap movement, I even use it for midday snoozes when I'm just resting my eyes. And here's the kicker. They let you test drive it. They've got a 60-night sleep trial. If you don't love it, ship it back. No harm, no foul. Free US shipping, and they ship internationally too. Right now, you can get 10% off the best sleep mask on the planet by going to mantasleep.com and using my code at checkout, Nick. That's mantasleep.com, and the code is NICK, Nick. Join the pro-nap movement. Try the Manta Sleep Mask. Good night. Let's dive a little deeper into that masculine, feminine dynamic. I'm not even going to say any more than that. Just let's run with that a little bit because I want to understand that better.
Okay, so this is a huge field of mine. This is where the majority of all my work goes into, because I think it maps onto absolutely everything. And what I think we've missed,
Jungian, right? This comes from
Carl Jung had a lot of work in this space, but it's also, it's been in humanity forever. It's the ancient traditions, the Shiva Shakti, the yin and yang. Like, it's basically that understanding that life moves in polarities. We always have a balance of two opposing forces that are not adversarial, they are collaborative, like night and day, like, rest and active energy. One doesn't survive without the other. Light and dark, all of these polarities. And yet what we've done is we're all in our dominant masculine, and that, because that's out of balance, it's become distorted. So what we associate, I did a ton of research around this, and even the language that we use, if we were to describe what we feel the masculine is and describe what we feel the feminine is, what we describe is a wounded masculine state and a wounded feminine state. We no longer even know what it is to be healthy. And yet the feminine is the receptive. So if you consider the feminine is, we are all in our feminine and we are all in our masculine at multiple times throughout the day in this constant flow. You're in your feminine when you are receiving constant stimuli. So sound, smell, taste, flavor, all of it. You are interpreting this vast, huge, numerous amounts of data. And then you go into your masculine. So the feminine takes everything. That's why it's all about paradox, duplicity. It can deal with complicated multiple levels of things. And then you move into your masculine, just like I would, to streamline that into a single focus so that you can then make a decision on what to do. Okay, I'm going to move forward in this direction. I'm going to do this. I'm going to put a jacket on. I'm going to, whatever it might be. And we're constantly going back and forth throughout that. So the feminine is the receptivity, and then the masculine is then when we put it to action. But subtly over time, in so many ways, we have kind of demonized that feminine state, which means we don't give ourselves the space, because the feminine is all about space. We don't give ourselves the space to receive enough. So we respond before we fully got all the information, before we fully allowed ourselves to process, allowed ourselves to feel. We don't want to feel. We don't want to stay in the emotions. We don't want to stay in feeling. And so we move into our masculine as quickly as possible. We want to fix something. We want to take action. And we are denying ourselves what makes us healthy and what makes us whole. And we're denying ourselves our fullest intelligence. And because we're responding too quickly, it means that our masculine actions are not intelligently informed enough. So we're not allowing the feminine intelligence and we're not allowing the masculine intelligence because, the masculine doesn't have enough to work with.
Yeah, I have this ongoing theory that the rise in the popularity of podcasts is a response to being hit on social media with all these 15-second clips that are very binary. Something is good, something's bad. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to not do. And the podcasts are much more free-flowing, wide open. We can ask questions, really explain things, talk about nuance. And what you just made me think of is maybe the social media framework is much more masculine. I had never thought about it this way, but where you're getting hit with all the answers without any context, whereas the podcast is much more feminine. Oh, we're just going to explore this issue together, and I don't know where it's going to go. Let's just see what happens. We'll just kind of take all this in.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a good example. And it's allowing that we don't allow ourselves the curiosity for exploration anymore. And the more that the world becomes frightening, the more that we become overwhelmed with so much happening, the more we want to reassure ourselves. And so we want to go into knowing, to a fixed mindset of it's this, it's not that. Rather than yes and, rather than what else, rather than, I wonder, like I could be feeling something in this experience and you could be feeling something different and both are valid. Can we make space for more than one viewpoint? We're so divisive now and it's hurting everybody. Yes
and is a really important idea right now. And Scott Barry Kaufman, who he writes, I believe he's a psychologist by training. In fact, I know he is. And that's something that he just wrote this book on trauma and escaping a victim mindset in a very positive, forward-leaning book. But he talks a lot about that idea of yes and, whereas we are very, as a society, stuck in binary thinking right now, right? I'm either going to like this thing or I don't like it. That's good, that's bad. And that yes and is just, it's a nice little mindset shift to just take in other possibilities. One thing can be true and this opposite can be true at the same time. And we've got to figure out how they fit together.
How they fit together in this context and how they fit together in another context, which could be wildly different. Again, all those variables and just allowing that space rather than just really locking something down. Yeah. Again, it's the feminine.
Right.
I'm a real champion for this.
Therapy is like, I could totally get into this. I mean, this is, right. Yeah. Let's shift gears a little bit on the, there is a strange, ties a few things together that we've been talking about. There's a strange new, it's small right now, but it does seem to be growing with people who are developing close ties and they feel like relationships to various AI avatars. I mean, you hear these stories about somebody has a boyfriend or a girlfriend and they're actually digital. What's going on there?
I find it I just feel heartbroken you just mentioning that because people are so lonely and they are feeling so misunderstood and they are just looking for connection, but they no longer know how to connect. And I think something that, look, I know we're all so sick of talking about COVID and we all just want to move on and forget it, but I don't think any of us really acknowledged what a deep wound that left and how much it frightened, especially people who were naturally introverted anyway. And we're accustomed to having to spend a certain amount of energy to read social cues and adjust and put themselves out there. And then suddenly, lockdown comes along and it's like, you don't have to do that anymore. And there's a
Right.
safety in hiding, right?
Yeah.
Where we can, and we can, it's not just about literally hiding indoors. So many of us do this, as I referred to earlier. You know, my childhood self learned to hide certain parts of me, and I had to unlearn that. But there can be a comfort in what is less painful, right? So if you have been out in the world, if you've experienced rejection, if, say, you know, you've not had a great time with friends, or you've had some difficult relationship experiences, you can feel really wounded by that and afraid of putting yourself out there again. Now, if AI comes along and gives you a safe space where you're not going to get that human rejection, and that you know that someone is totally going to be on your side, totally going to adore you and say all the right things and do all the right things, you know, you can see why there's appeal there for people, right? But the real
Sure.
deep connection is that they're seeking is not going to be one that's helpful, because actually we heal through relationships, but we heal through, I mean, maybe we can heal through a relationship with an AI to a certain extent, but we really heal through that beautiful connection with another human being. And so, yeah, where that's going, I don't know. I think it's going to lead to even more fragmentation of the self, and people becoming even more disconnected from what they truly need. And I think that is really deeply sad.
Yeah, because my instinct towards that is that, like you said, we heal through relationships. And when we say relationships, that means with other human beings, because so much of that is that you have to meet the other person halfway, right? I have to be aware of where you are coming from, what you are interested in talking about right now. If I just took over this conversation, made it all about me, and paid no attention to what you were saying, you would start to reject that conversation. And so I would pick up, hopefully, on some of those cues and adjust and bring it back around to more of a interplay between the two of us, rather than just a one-way street. And what concerns me about an AI relationship, I'm sure there are some exceptions where it can be helpful, is that AI doesn't ever do that, right? That AI doesn't have its own thoughts, feelings, dreams, aspirations, or even a desire in that conversation, other than just to give to whoever is typing or speaking on the other end. And that doesn't seem like a great framework to then go take to connect with other human beings, because of the absence of rejection.
The absence of rejection and the absence of, so what people are seeking there is, with an AI, is they want a relationship without any vulnerability. So they never want to have any risk. They don't want to expose themselves. And so how do we ever, if we're never allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, that disconnects us from so much other resource in ourselves. And we're basically saying, I'm only going to do something if it's absolutely safe. You know, if it's absolutely guaranteed that I'm never going to get rejected, you're never learning through anything, and you're never really being whole. Like, the way that we heal is through allowing another person to witness our vulnerability and learning that actually that's beautiful and that's safe and that's who we really are. Because vulnerability is allowing ourselves to be seen.
Right. And probably not all the perfect parts of ourselves. Right. If I'm going to be vulnerable, it's sharing some of the mistakes I've made. There was a situation I did not handle it well, and then allowing someone else to see that and to know that. I mean, is that accurate in terms of vulnerability?
Yeah, it's a part of it for sure. But it's also, if you think about those relationships that we're now exploring with AI, is they are operating in a quote unquote perfect way as well, right? So we become less tolerant of other people's vulnerability, of other people's, what we might say or perceive socially as weaknesses. So what are we doing to humanity by no longer tolerating each other for our human flaws, of which we all have many. And that's part of the flow of, we're getting it wrong all the time. We're just living, right? We're just figuring this stuff out together, ideally, rather than in silo with a little robot pal.
Right. On the COVID, you mentioned some of the wounds that people experienced during that time. And I am in agreement with you. We do all want to forget about it, move past it. When a documentary came on the other day that was showing the world during COVID, and I watched maybe, 15, 20 minutes of it. And it immediately elicited this reaction in me that was, it was just not a good feeling. And this is really interesting, and I'm going to turn and watch something else. I don't want to go back and access all those feelings. But it was such a absolutely foreign experience to all of us, and a traumatizing experience on different levels, just to have no idea what was going on. What are some of the ways we can explore that, acknowledge that, own some of that, so that we don't end up with creating more things that are bouncing around in our subconscious that are going to negatively impact us going forward?
It goes back to the yes and, I think. It's really being able to map out all the strangeness that entailed, and how we, how do you feel you might be a slightly different person on the other side of COVID? We all want to say that we're not, right? But imagine like that, the world suddenly threw us a curveball that was completely unexpected, and so much was immediately taken outside of our control.
Yeah.
What is that communicating to us? Where is the trust in the world and in our stability when something can suddenly change and we haven't seen it coming, and all our autonomy is taken away? That is bound to leave a mark. You're bound to have some sort of psychological response to that. And I think what I hear a lot from people who could do with maybe reflecting a bit more about this is when they go, I feel really guilty because I actually had a great lockdown.
Right.
When they go, I actually had a really good time, because what they're doing is dismissing that it still impacted them on any level. And it's yes and.
Right.
It's like, you didn't have a terrible time, and you were able to, take some more rest and relaxation, and you got some great time off from your job and all of this stuff. At the same time, you were still dealing with a collective where the news was telling you that, people were dying in droves every day, that the world was completely shifting, that there was so much suffering that apparently you're separate from. Again, there's feelings around that. There's bound to be. And where do we put that? We just lock it away. We just stuff it down. But everything, like I said, everything impacts everything else. So it's important to just understand, what was my experience, and how did that impact me, and what did it communicate to me about myself or about my environment or the world around me, and just start to connect those dots rather than just, collect them.
Yes, well put. It's funny. I mean, if we're going to turn this into a therapy session here, I think about those negative feelings that came up during that documentary, and when you were just unpacking all of that. I am absolutely guilty of that as well, saying like there was a lot of upside to it. I had a wonderful time spending so much more time with my kids, with my wife. Things were simplified in a lot of ways. On the flip side of that, though, there was economic hardship that lasted for several years after the lockdowns had ended, because of the educational space that the business is in. And we did survive it, and now things are thriving again. And my tendency is to focus on that because I'm grateful for that, and that is wonderful news now. But I think those are the negative feelings that suddenly pop up when it was like, oh, there was a lot of stress during that time, in addition to the good stuff. It was very much a yes and.
Yeah.
I probably need to do some work and unpack that a little bit further.
No, it's just interesting. It's even, I noticed a small tell in myself, and this is not something, I need to be in therapy for, but it's just interesting that I noticed I went back. Now, I've actually heard other people speak about this. I became almost fanatical about listening to certain podcasts, repeated episodes of certain shows that I liked, certain films, and I'm not someone who, I like to have a diverse range of things going on all the time. I went into such a place of comfort of, what made me feel almost like what connected me with a time when things were more free or things were more safe or whatever that was.
Right.
And it's just really interesting to acknowledge that, to notice that. And again, I had a good lockdown myself. I was working more than ever because everyone was really quite stressed. But I was alone, and I think that I recognized some behaviors coming out of lockdown where I was definitely changed and I was less sociable. I'm someone who I like to be out meeting friends as much as possible. I would almost find excuses not to meet people, even though a part of me was desperate to be out and about again. There was a comfort of, this is my space where I know I am safe. I know I can keep myself, I know what the outcome of this is going to be. And I was still in a risk aversion mode. And it's really, I've heard that from a lot of people who suddenly were less interested in going out and meeting friends and finding excuses to kind of spend time by themselves. Because remember, we had been told that suddenly being around other humans is dangerous. And then you're supposed to suddenly forget that again and go, well, which one is it?
Listen to the music right now under my voice. This entire track was made 100% with AI. No studio, no instruments, just ElevenLabs. They made the intro and the outro music to this episode too. For years, I ran into the same problem that every creator knows. Subpar stock music that kills the vibe, or amazing tracks that you can't use because of copyright. The ElevenLabs music generator is the solution. And that's just one tool that they offer. You can use their vast library of AI voices to spice up your videos, produce music, like the track you're listening to right now, or even download my voice to narrate your new audiobook. ElevenLabs lets creators unlock ideas that used to take a whole team and a massive budget. I'm always looking for ways to stay ahead of the curve. That's why I've partnered with ElevenLabs, to show you how AI can be a part of your creative process, not replace it. If you're curious, check out the ElevenLabs link right down below in the show notes. Because the future of creativity, well, you're literally listening to it.
The Nick Standlea Show.
Have you seen Couples Therapy?
Oh, I love it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I love the work that she does.
She's fantastic. Yeah.
And I only discovered this show recently, probably in a number of ways that led me to this conversation right here, because I found that show great. I thought the way that they discussed COVID, where they had some footage of what the online therapy was like and then kind of unpack that a little bit, was really insightful and great work. And then I saw your appearance on Slow Mo from a year ago, which is another great podcast, even though he's not doing it anymore. Those episodes are wonderful, and he's a really interesting human being. Funny enough, Jeffrey Sachs, who was also on that show, was just recently on here. So I feel connected to Slow Mo right now. In any event, I don't know where I was headed with that thought. I had somewhere where I was going with it.
You'd mentioned couples therapy of that show and how they were processing COVID.
Yeah. Well, so, okay. And outside of the COVID piece, so what are some of the tools you see her using in that show? Because you do like watching it, that also overlap into the work you do. Because I feel like you're just from this conversation, I can tell you're a super talented therapist. And what are some of the overlaps there on things that really work, tools that both of you use that can be useful to lots of people who are listening or watching right now?
Yeah, without meaning to sound repetitive, it just goes back to that attunement again. What Orna's really good at picking up on is the small cues, the body language, how the couples are responding to each other, how one might, even though the words they're saying is one thing, they're actually communicating something very different in their tone, in their demeanor, their body language. And
the thing is never the thing.
The thing is never the thing. And that can happen, one-to-one, or it can happen one-to, when you're with a couple and you just see what's playing out there. And she's just really good at bringing those dynamics to light. Like I said, once they're conscious, there's more available to you in order to the choices that you make of what to do with that.
Yeah.
And so often we don't realize how we're coming across or how we are perceiving something based on old scripts that we have or old experiences that we had of another person who we recognize that tone and it threatens us in some way that probably that person is not intending at all. Right.
Now, what would you be writing down on your pad or thinking in your head as this conversation is going on? What insights are you having where you go, with Nick, that thing is not that thing?
Do you know, I never, ever make notes in a therapy session.
Okay. But I mean,
I deliberately never mental notes. Again, it's interesting. The reason that I don't make notes is because I want to be completely attuned and locked in to the person.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I feel very present with you right now, but we're in conversation. We're not, I'm speaking as me. I'm not a therapist. When I'm in a therapeutic space, I'm really the receptacle for the client's material, which is why therapists don't tend to bring much of themselves unless it's really in service to the client. Everything must be in service to the client. So if I feel I've got an insight maybe of my personal experience that might be helpful, but it's very, very rare. I will usually be there to be their mirror, to be their guide, to reframe, to ask the questions, because I can see where the material needs to go based on the cues that I'm receiving from them. And again, even the felt sense that I'm picking up when I'm in relationship with this person. And, because there's not my ego, I might be speaking to you as my client, and I can see that you're getting a bit irritated with me. Now, if I was in conversation with you, like in this, I'd be thinking, shit, what did I do? What did I do? I'd think, where did I screw up? And I'd go into my experience of that. Whereas with a client, I'm thinking, that's interesting. They're irritated. There's something that they've picked up on there. I wonder what that's about. And I will, maybe if it feels appropriate, I'll invite them. I'll ask them, what are you feeling right now? Are you feeling and we'll see if we can take it there. And if the client feels comfortable enough with me to tell me that they're angry with me, well, that's fantastic. We can work with that. What is playing out between us? Because I'm not there as me, Hannah, and I'm their therapist, then what's the dynamic? This is something about them and their experience and how they relate to me and what they understand of me. Does that make sense?
Right. That does, which makes me want to ask, how does that affect your personal relationships, that switch between those two different modes, right? Because you described yourself as a receptacle for them, whereas you have a very different mental experience if you're just in a conversation. Yeah. What's the interplay like between those two modes for Hannah Lord? Well,
I definitely don't hang out with my clients. But that's why we have those boundaries as a therapist, so that the interpersonal doesn't cross over. So in my personal life, and it is, I think probably from people that haven't experienced therapy themselves, perhaps, quite often I get asked, like, well, are you therapizing me right now? Are you thinking about this? Are you thinking about that? And it's like, well, no, because I'm just me and I'm in relationship with you. And I'm hoping that you see me as well as I'm, trying to see you, because I'm trying to connect with you. Whereas as a therapist, you're trying to connect on a completely different level that's all about them. And it's about really accessing the fullness of them rather than it being a two-way experience. I probably haven't explained that. Go on.
No, that I thought that made sense. So in a session, you wouldn't bring up when you were young, you were writing scripts and had this creative extroversion, because that's not helpful to being the receptacle.
This was one of the key things at the very start of my training that we learned was all about boundaries and why they're important and why keeping that sort of relationship so contained, why that's crucial. And we all rejected that when we heard it, because it's like, well, no, that's so cold, that's so sterile. Like, how can they really feel like they're connected to you? And yet when you understand, boundaries actually are the things that help you connect deeper as a therapist, because it keeps the client really in their own space. This space is fully for them, which is very rare that we get that time ever for that space. I mean, for some clients, depending on what their material is, they've never been listened to before. They've never been able to take up space themselves. They've never been the center of attention or, any of that stuff. And if you think small little things, like if we start a session and they say, oh, hey, how are you? And they're asking me lots, and I go, oh, do you know what? I was late this morning and I'm just super stressed. And that already comes into their session, right? Because they're thinking, oh God, well, I better make this easy for her, or I'm a bit of a burden,
right.
or they're thinking, well, that's not like I'm paying you, so I don't want you to be tired. Like all of these things are now in the work where it's not in service to them at all. This needs to be about them and their experience, not them thinking, is this okay for you, my therapist?
Right. And if I'm the client coming in, I'm sure it's very key for me to feel comfortable to really open up and feel like it's a space where I can say anything. It's critical that we're not blurring those lines outside of the therapy sessions, because that would encroach on that space. Mm-hmm. What's some of the other work, right? Because we hear this phrase, do the work, right? Do the work on ourselves. Mm-hmm. And clearly there is meeting with a talented therapist like yourself who's going to be attuned to the client. What's some of the other work around that to just help build our mental resilience and be more in tune with what's going on inside?
So back to the yes and, it's making space for your own experience of something. Now that can be, for some people, we have to allow ourselves to feel and to process certain stuff. But for everyone, we have to take responsibility for ourselves. It's so easy to project out. And if we are in an argument with somebody and we feel hurt by them, or we feel angry with them, we can just look at what they've said, what they've done. And that's important to acknowledge for ourselves. It's not about dismissing. It's not about never letting yourself feel hurt. But also, what was I contributing there? What was happening for me there? And what was I responding to there? And making space for two different experiences to be equally valid and to be equally explored. So always having that accountability for ourselves as well. It's so important in our communication. We love black and white thinking. So we love someone to be the victor. We love someone to be wrong and someone to be right. And we definitely want to be the ones who are right. And the world just doesn't work like that, right? We're all right and we're all wrong quite often.
Yeah. What advice would you have to someone who, let's say they've made a major mistake? They betrayed someone, they hurt someone deeply that they really cared about. And it's many years later and they're struggling to forgive themselves for this momentary error in judgment. And it's it's holding them back from moving forward from this moment in the past.
Well, again, because we're human beings, we should always be in service to evolution, to growing, to changing, to evolving. And so I always see everything as information. And I believe that all of our emotions, it's why it's so important that we don't shut them down. Our emotions we are designed in such a sophisticated way. We're all aware of how many incredible processes are in our biological makeup. Everything is there in such a clever design. And yet we seem to think for some reason that our emotions are broken and they need to be avoided, and they're not. Let them come through. They are there for a reason. And they contain information that's going to take us to the next place. What can we learn from them? We can't learn anything if we shut them away. Can't learn anything if we ignore them. So with a lot of the situations like the one that you used as an example, ask yourself the question, is this in service to me growing and changing, or is this in service to me? Is this keeping me stuck? And that applies to so many different situations. What am I holding on to here? That blame, that judgment, is that in service to growth, or is that keeping you stuck? And why are you so attached to that? Quite often, bizarrely, whether it's self-loathing, criticism, even addictions, compulsions, a lot of negative behaviors that cause us pain, on some unconscious level are giving us something. They're soothing us in some way. So we need to understand, what is that? Why are you so attached to this? Why are you clinging on to it? What does it give you? And how do you learn to let it go so that you're not stuck with it? So that's how I'd work with that.
Yeah, I like that. That's that's good. That's good. You mentioned these complex physical processes that go on, and one of my reoccurring guests is a physician who comes and speaks on physical health topics, and every time I speak to him, I am blown away when he will explain processes that are happening in the body all the time, unconscious, incredibly complex mechanisms that keep us alive day to day. To use that as a metaphor for what goes on upstairs here and with the emotional landscape, what does that look like with emotions? What are our emotions? What functions do they play for us? Because I think so many people think, yeah, if I could just suppress these emotions a little bit more, they're often getting in the way of solid reasoning or just getting done what I need to get done. But they are there for a reason. I just want to unpack that a little bit more.
Yeah, they are there for a reason. And so I'll simplify because it is quite complex, but say anger, for example. Anger is a really positive, healthy emotion. Not aggression, not anger in its distorted forms, not rage, but anger is that feeling, that incensed feeling of injustice, that feeling of this is not okay. It allows us to implement our own boundaries, to know, how to regulate and keep ourselves safe. It's a conduit for change. It suggests something needs to happen here. It's communicating, this is not okay, something needs to change. That's a very positive thing to work with. It doesn't mean that you have to act vengefully on it or act in a distorted, aggressive way, but you shouldn't deny yourself that, because when we tell ourselves, we attach these things to identity. I can't feel that. I'm not an angry person. I don't want to be angry. Then we trap it away, and that's when it becomes bottled up, and it will leak out at times and become distorted in a form that's not healthy, in a form that is ugly for us. And again, with sadness, like so much of the feelings with grief, are there because sadness is, you need to feel the pain in order to heal. It's telling you that you have to give pause to something. You have to give space to something. You have to give some time to something. And it's all the time, it's giving us that information. It's calling our attention to something. And again, if we don't tend to it, it's like not attending to physical wounds and just letting them fester and rot and become a much bigger problem. So we can't. So I can't remember the study now, but there's a fantastic neuroscientist, I believe, who says that it takes 90 seconds for us to fully process an emotion. 90 seconds in the body, and yet to let it come to fruition. It doesn't mean we stop feeling or we don't have any reactions to it. But 90 seconds for it to fully give us the information that it needs to. We can't tolerate that. We can't stay with a feeling for 90 seconds. We have to go in, we have to override it, we have to dominate it. And it's doing us so much harm because we're not informed, and also that very act of doing that communicates that emotions are fearful. So it's propagating that fear response of, I can't feel this, this is not right, this is not safe.
Well, that speaks to why sometimes during an argument, it can be very helpful to just take a break, especially in a romantic partnership situation, to just step away for a second. Not that that's the end where you don't discuss what needs to be discussed, but just take a few minutes to process what emotions are coming up and sit with them for a minute. You may find you're not as angry as you thought you were, or the thing that you thought you were angry about is not the thing.
The thing is not the thing. But it's
and then be able to, go ahead.
No, you're totally correct. I think it's giving it that, again, the feminine space that we need. But it's important when in relationship to always check in with your intentions, both of your intentions, because when you give each other space in a relationship, that is so powerful. It's so beneficial. But what's your intention with that space? It's for us to figure this out, for us to feel and understand our own process in this a little better. That is not the same as withdrawing or shutting down. I'm going to take space, which is actually what I want to do is punish this person and reject them and make them feel bad. So we have to always be accountable for what our honest intentions are towards each other. And are we doing this as a conduit to connecting deeper and coming back together and figuring this out together? Or are we doing it as a way to, really throw shade on the other person and make them feel like shit?
I wanted to ask about online dating, what dating looks like today, because it's something that I am completely removed from. These online apps didn't exist when I got together with my wife. And so I've never had any experience with it, but my friends who have, or relatives who have divorced, or they're younger and they're in the mix these days, there are very mixed feelings about them. It's funny because it sounds great on the surface as a way to just be able to meet a whole lot of people and find people you connect with and go from there. And yet I don't hear a lot of great feedback about them. And so what's the disconnect there?
Again, I think it's really hurting people's relationship with their own vulnerability, because a lot of people are experiencing that rejection fatigue of going on bad dates or not really connecting. People aren't giving, because there's so much availability, or there's so much, that kind of swipe culture. It's easy to give up on something before you give a person a real chance. And so, of course, everyone's just feeling unseen, rejected in some way. And look, nothing's all good or all bad ever. And I think there are lots of people who have met on apps and are very, very happy. It is a good way to connect with people you might not have met otherwise. But I think it's still encouraging these behaviors whilst hidden behind a screen, where you can, sort of thumbs up or thumbs down on somebody. Right. And that's not really a connective human interaction. And I just think it's encouraging, and especially like with the levels of ghosting that goes on as well, of people being able to hide behind a screen and just say, nah, not feeling it, or, not interested anymore, or can't make it now. And I think it's just sending everyone a bit mad, to be honest.
Right, because if you went to a place to go meet someone, and even if you're not interested after a little bit of conversation or whatever it might be, you still have to exit the conversation. You wouldn't just suddenly cut it off mid-sentence, just turn and walk away. And there are some just basic human connection skills that are even built in those moments when you're in a room with someone, when it doesn't work out. And I could see that what you're saying with an app where at some point you're just going, oh, found something better. I'm going to ghost this other person that I was texting with, or we were going to meet up, or even if you ended up on a date with someone and you're like, well, it's only 7:00, not interested here after 30 seconds. I can get somebody else to meet by 8:00.
Yeah.
That
Exactly.
doesn't seem great for connection. Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I would never have met anyone, by chance in person and gone, okay, give me all your credentials. Where did you go to school?
Right.
What did you do? What did you,
Right.
give me some, it's just, and because we're setting it up in that way, we're constantly looking for similarities rather than celebrating each other's differences. And actually we unconsciously seek out our missing parts, our opposites anyway. You're never going to find that on an app because you're trying to match with someone who's the same as you. And and because that premise is all about, does this criteria fit for me? Then as soon as that person is on the date and they don't, they say something that maybe doesn't fit exactly what you think, or that we have no tolerance for it. And people are obsessed with all these, red flags and all the signs in which a person is garbage. It's it's such a negative thing to put out there, and it's not helping us. We're not curious about each other anymore.
Right.
We're just judging.
Right. Two things come to mind there. One of the younger folks that I work with showed me this meme. It was maybe like a year ago, but it was this girl on Instagram or TikTok and talking about what she was looking for on the apps. And it was, 6'4", blue eyes, works in finance. Because of that, there were all these remixes of that meme. But I thought, wow, if people are connecting with this, if other people are taking it and remixing it, and even the remixes are getting millions of views, there's something there that people are really connecting with, which is how ridiculous this system works. And when I think about my relationship with my wife, it is not all about the similarities. I mean, all the interesting stuff is in the differences, in the unexpected stuff. Her coming from a different place, a different culture, and bringing variety to my life, and hopefully I'm doing the same for her. And I hadn't thought about it that way, but if you're just looking for a list of criteria on this dating app or somebody that's just like you, I mean, yeah, you'd push the eject button long before you knew where that magic alchemy, that mix of two people coming together that you wouldn't expect to have that energy, that spark that makes life more interesting for both of them.
Yeah, it sort of marries the principles of the masculine, feminine anyway. And I don't mean this this is not exclusive to heterosexual relationships. It's the complement of two different energies coming together. Mm-hmm. Too much of the same energy doesn't work. And you get out of balance. So yeah, you can bond over similar interests, but you don't want to be the same person. You're not looking for your complete match. It's not, that's not going to be the alchemy, like you say. Right.
If we both agree on everything, one of us doesn't need to be here.
Well, is it in service to you growing or keeping you stuck? You already know what you think. You don't need more of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, as we wind this down, the last bit on that, what is going to because I love your metaphor of going to the gym to do mental work, to destigmatize this idea of doing mental work and building those skills, because there was a time not that long ago when no one understood the importance of physical health. I mean,
totally. We all forget that, but it wasn't that long ago.
Right. right? There weren't any gyms to go get a membership at and do all that stuff. What does it look like going to the gym on a daily basis, but with that for the mental space?
I think it really is. So space is the key word. I think it's just making space to always have that curiosity. And curiosity is the opposite of judgment. We're so quick to make judgments. We need to just dial it back a little bit, give ourselves some space and go, okay, this is what I think. What else might be going on? It's yes, right. And it's not denying what we think. It's adding in extra information. Can we be curious? Can we be researchers? Can we look at this in a scientific way and think, what else am I missing? Let go of the ego. We love to think we know everything. What do we not know about this situation? What have I not yet understood about this situation that might have some very key information? And that allows us to get into our unconscious a bit more. It allows us to see other people more clearly, to tolerate other people better, and just become more intelligent, basically.
Be curious. Yeah. Well, on that note, Hannah, an absolute pleasure to get to talk to you this morning for me, this evening for you. And thank you so much for your time and for everything.
No, thank you. It's been a great conversation.
Absolutely. And Hannah, anybody that wants to find you online, where's the best place to find you?
Yes, so my website is hannalord.co.uk, and I also write a weekly Substack, which is called It's Not What You Think.
Fantastic. All right, Hannah, have an excellent evening.
All right, you too. Thank you so much, and see you soon.
Okay, everybody, until next time, ask questions, don't accept the status quo, and be curious.
The Nick Standlea Show.